All right, welcome to Lab 1, the first lab of Music Production 2. If we navigate to Modules and we go under Module 1, you can find Lab 1. It's called a Pro Tools Review. It's really more of a mixing, editing, everything we did in Music Production 1 type of review. If we look at the assignment here, I'll open that up in a second, and then we'll also take a look at the instructions. But let's just look at what the actual lab is. So the objectives for this lab are to review the basics of settings, review the basics of setting up a Pro Tools session, including the exciting world of file management, session parameters and displays, settings, workflows, that type of thing. And then we'll also review the basics of some of the editing we did, mixing, finalizing, and backing up the session. So this lab will take a while because you're basically going to take a session from scratch, grab its reference mix, and then I think it's about 16 tracks, and you're going to mix a session. So this will take longer than a normal 100-minute class period, or longer than that. Hold on, we're getting Canvas exam security enhancements. We do not want any enhancements. I closed that window. Anyways, getting back to the lab, it will take you a minute to do this. So set aside some time to go through and do this. You will be doing basically a mix top to bottom, which is everything we covered in Music Production 1. So you can almost think about it, this lab is like the 10 labs, or a review rather, and a very light review. This is not going to take you 17 days to complete. But you're going through the entire process. So it's going to go from everywhere here. You can see for the criteria, you're going to be setting up the session, organizing it, labeling it, color coding, doing all the kind of fun things we did last semester. But then we're going to get into basic editing of, you perform basic edits, and basic mixing as well. So, and then you're going to save that, share it just like you did in Music Production 1. So we'll go through all the steps here. I think the first thing is to get everything into the session and actually create a session. So let's head on over to the directions or the instructions. And so yeah, we're going to review the basics of editing, mixing, finalizing, and backing up a session, as well as deal with all the sort of workflow and sort of configuration things that we also learned in Music Production and Recording 1, or Music Production 1. There's a whole mess of shortcut keys. Here are probably the best of from Music Production 1, or the ones I use all the time. So I just included them here. We're not really getting tested on, or, there's no requirement to know the shortcut keys. It's just a lot of times people ask what they are. People like to be fast. So I definitely think these shortcut keys can help you do that. So the first thing you want to do, as the lab describes here, is make sure you go ahead and make sure that your interface is working and activated. For this lab, I'm doing it in the home studio here, so I'm just using an SSL2 interface. So my interface will look a little bit different than yours, or my I/O will look a little bit different. But if you're using any of these Scarlets, it's always good to just make sure that it's plugged in. The way you can tell that the USB is connected to the computer is there's a little green light here, as you can see, which shows us that it's in fact connected via USB here. You can see on my Scarlett interface, there's a green light as well next to this little USB symbol to show me that it's connected. I notice sometimes at home, especially on the SSL, if the computer goes to sleep, it'll show that it's plugged in, but actually it is not connected. So sometimes just unplugging it and plugging it back in will help. Of course, as always, turning the entire computer off and turning it back on again will help as well in the process. So the first thing we're going to do is create a session in the correct with the correct name and the correct format. I've already had to set up my session here. If you notice, I'm already getting level into this session, and that is because I'm actually running this help video here. So as I'm doing these video walkthroughs here, you'll notice I always have these two other tracks that are hidden here. One is my talkback so that I can hear myself, as well as that my voice is getting recorded onto this walkthrough. as well as I've set up a second master, which is actually sending to QuickTime, which is how I'm doing this screen cap. So I leave them active, but I just select them and hide them just so that we won't see them in the workflow. But periodically, if I'm talking, you'll actually see my volume in the master fader. I already brought in the reference track that we're going to be using, but just to go back to the step of creating a session, you're just going to do Command N as in new, or go up to File and Create New Session. If we go to the dashboard window here, we're going to name it appropriately. So I'm just doing year, month, date, my name, right? So I think I just named it Lab 1 and then Doug B when I did it. I made sure that it's wave, 24-bit for the bit depth, 44.1 for the sample rate, and then stereo mix for the I/O. I'm just saving this session to my desktop. I'm going to hit cancel here and not create because I already have a session. And if I hit create, then you'll stop hearing me and the world will come to an end. So, or you'll just not hear me. The world will be fine. Yeah, I already had to kind of do that step, and I already had to drag in the reference track because I just wanted to make sure that the level that you were hearing of the playback in the session wasn't too much louder than my voice. So I've been just trying to, this is all like QuickTime stuff that I'm doing to sort of manage it, but I think it's appropriate to talk about in the walkthrough because it's all related to the signal flow of Pro Tools. So the next thing it wants you to do, if we go back to the directions here, is to configure the playback engine as well as the I/O settings. So let's just take a minute and do that while we're talking about I/Os and the kind of weird I/O that I'm using, as well as the playback engine. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go up to setup. First, I'll start with playback engine. We know we're in business because here it is up under the playback engine device. I have the SSL selected here. You can see there's a bunch of other options. I have a couple other interfaces plugged in as well as just a bunch of other stuff. All these audio bridge, you can see the audio bridge 2A. That's actually what I'm using to send to QuickTime to do this walkthrough. So you'll actually see that later in my I/O, but my main playback engine is the SSL. And then I just have my hardware buffer size set to 512. You can change it to 1024 if you want to get sort of maximum processing power while you're mixing, but this is pretty fast. It's like a M2 Pro chip, M2 Pro Max chip. I had to get that in there. So it's pretty fast and we've got a bunch of RAM. So usually 512 is enough processing power. I'm just worried about putting it at 1024 because then I actually might start to get some delay in this talkback mic and that might make it hard for me to do the walkthrough. It says the video engine is enabled. I think this is just from a previous session. I would probably uncheck that, but I don't want to derail this video, so I'm not going to mess with the engine at all. And then, yeah, I just usually make sure most of these boxes are unchecked. They're for sort of special cases, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the semester. So I'm just going to hit OK. We didn't really make any changes. The other thing is the lab wants you to take a look at the I/O. So let's go to our I/O. If you notice, our I/O is pretty straightforward. In the output tab here, we just have output 1 and 2. That's probably what you should see. You should see your Scarlett or whatever interface up here. And you can see it. I have the SSL2 here, and it's just going out 1 and 2. Notice I also have this other I/O that I made, which was the Pro Tools audio bridge. And that's going out 1 and 2. That's how I'm doing the audio for this walkthrough video. By the way, if these get messed up, you can always highlight them and then just hit delete and then just put the default paths on. Sometimes the I/O transfers from like a rogue session you opened up, and so then it'll mess up the I/O from your current session or if you try to create a new one. This bus looks pretty good. I've got buses 1 through 24 here. And then look at, I also have 2 other mapping outputs, which is output 1 and 2, which should just be so that we can hear it. And then I also have it going to this audio bridge to go to QuickTime. Sometimes I relabel this like out to QuickTime just to be clear, but I don't know. I've been using the audio bridge long enough now that when I see that, I know what that's for. I know that I'm like, okay, that's for doing a walkthrough video. And my inputs should be really straightforward because like I said, this is just an SSL2. So it just has 2 inputs and 2 outputs. So I'm not going to change anything here. I'll just hit cancel. And my I/O looks all good. So the next thing it wants you to do is actually drag in, download some of the session files, or download some of the audio files, which are the individual multi-track as well as this reference track. So before you do that, there's a little tip here in the lab, which I find this like super helpful, and it's kind of obnoxious that it's not just automatic. I'd rather it be an automatic preference that you have to turn off, because it would probably save us a lot of grief, especially for people just learning Pro Tools and importing tracks. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to the Pro Tools menu and then go to Settings. And then under there, the settings will open up the preference pane here. And we're going to turn on this feature which says automatically copy files on import. Meaning if you drag files in from wherever you drag them in, the internet, somewhere on your computer, it will take those audio files that you're dragging into your session and copy them into the audio files folder. Thank goodness. Why has it taken so long for this checkbox? I think this checkbox has been here for a long time, but I'm just a little annoyed that it's kind of not automatic and that it's been hidden under this Pro Tools preference pane for quite a long time. So let's go ahead and just set that. It should probably be already checked in my session. But yeah, if I go up to Pro Tools and Settings, and then I go to, it's under the Processing tab up here at the top. And yeah, you can see automatically copy files on import. So now as I drag stuff into my tracks list over here, and it propagates them in the playlist here, they'll be copied to the audio files folder. So then I don't have to, at the end, do all these like save copy in, or hope that some of the things that I recorded or some of the things that I did are going to be in the audio files folder. Next lab, we'll talk about some advanced recording stuff, and we'll talk about disk allocation. And the thing about disk allocation is when we're recording, sometimes still we cannot be recording to the audio files folder in a session, which is yet another headache. So we'll just learn how to allocate audio to specific disks when we're recording, and we should be in business. So yeah, we'll just put this on here. I'm just going to hit cancel because we already have it checked. The next part in the lab has you actually download these two zip files. One is the full multi-track. The second one here, which is horribly labeled full preview 77-1, that is the actual reference track. I edited the reference track a little bit to make it line up with the multi-track session when you drag it in. So I just tried to make it a little bit easier for you. So if you notice here in the session, there's quite a bit of like sort of dead space here at the start of the reference track. And the reason that is the multi-track doesn't actually start till around bar 11. So I tried to make it so that they lined up a little bit easier or a little bit better so that you could, listen and, refer back and forth between the multi-track and the reference track, which if you remember from Music Production 1, we're mixing to win, right? So we're trying to listen to this reference track and trying to make our track sound as much like it as possible, if not better. So let's drag in those multi-tracks as well. So they're just sitting here on my desktop. I've already unzipped them. And so, yeah, if we go to our folder that we made, notice there is the reference track right now is in the audio files folder because I already dragged that in, but none of these are in here. None of the multi-track are in here. The reference track's in there, but not the multi-track. So let me go ahead and open up this folder. Here's Santa Fe. By the way, they usually, with these sessions too, there's usually like a README text file here, which tells you like usually what the BPM is. It didn't in this one. It just told us that Telefunken did this recording at their studios. I believe it's in Connecticut. I think my friend Alan maybe was part of this recording. But anyways, I went to undergrad with him. That's just a side story. I don't know. But anyways, so it was there. It just says don't use this for a commercial release. So this is like a real band, and they did a real recording. So don't steal their stuff. So anyways, we'll highlight all the tracks that we want. There's quite a few here, and I'm just going to drag this then into the tracks list. When I do that, you can see it will fill up the session. And you can see there's quite a bit of dead air here at the start of the multi-tracks. So I added, like I said, some length to that reference track to make it sort of fit in time with the other tracks. Okay, and by the way, since we dragged it in, just for, everyone's peace of mind here, notice now in my year month date, this is my actual lab folder. If you notice when I go to the audio files folder, they're in my session and you can actually see they all got copied into the audio files folder. So now when I go to save and share this session, everything I need will be in that folder. And then when I go to bounce, I can just go and bounce right in that same folder, zip the whole thing and be able to share it. So it's a really important checkbox in the preferences, going back to the copy on import. Let's do a little session management here first. I think the next part of the lab is just to sort of get organized after we've dragged everything in. It wants us to sort of color code things. I also dragged the reference track in already, and I labeled it reference mix, or I think I just called it reference track. Let's set our tempo first, and then we'll get into some color coding. I can't stand looking at the session without it color coded and organized here, but let's bear with it here. We're going to go over to tempo. And by the way, if you can't see some of these or you're not in bars and beats like I am, you can go to the little edit ruler view selector here, and you can turn things on. I have bars and beats on. I like to keep minutes and seconds on just so I have like some idea of what the time is. And then I'll usually have markers and tempo on. I don't need like time code and feet and frames and samples. And so the thing is too, notice that my main time is bars and beats. If I click on minutes and seconds, notice how that gets gray, so that becomes my main time. But usually music, I work in bars and beats. So if I go next to tempo here, there's this tiny little plus symbol here. I'm gonna click on there to change the tempo, and that's gonna open up yet another tiny window called the tempo change window. And I'm gonna make it 70 beats per minute. I tapped in the tempo earlier and it's roughly 70, so you'll notice it'll drift. I don't think they really recorded this with a hard click track. I think it's kind of a more vibey track. So it'll drift a little bit, but this will at least give us some sort of basis by which to put in markers and that type of thing. So I'm gonna set the tempo to 70. I'm just typing that in, 70, and then notice it wants to put the location at 11. So instead, I'm going to put it at bar 1, beat 1, and that means it should right here at the start change to 70 beats per minute. So let's do that. So now it's 70 beats per minute, and I think then what ends up happening is then the track sort of starts right at around bar 7. I think there's like a little lead in here. Yeah, so it's a little off, but yeah. But that gets us a little bit closer. We're listening to like everything right now. Yeah, so here's so that's pretty good. I'm just going to turn it up a little bit. It's like really quiet compared to the reference track, which I was doing my levels with earlier. So anyways, as we, the next thing we want to do, so we've set our tempo there, right? It's at 70, and you can see some of it is lining up pretty well with the grid. It's a little bit off, because like I said, they just didn't really, and then it gets like ahead. So they're drifting quite a bit. This was not done to a click. If we really wanted to quantize the heck out of this thing, we could go in with elastic audio, which we'll talk about later in the semester, and sort of impose a grid to the music. But this is kind of like Lake Street Drive. I don't know. It's that kind of vibe, this like neo like funk soul revival thing. So it's supposed to be a little bit loose and it's supposed to be a little bit groovy. I guess I'd just rather go back and listen to the original soul. But anyways, that's not the point of this walkthrough video. I'll leave my opinions to myself. So yeah, the next part is to go ahead and color code. We're going to use my color coding system. I guess you can use your own. Just make sure you have one. So as you know, I usually like to have all drums yellow. I like to have the bass purple. The keys, I have this like orange color. The vocals, I just leave that default blue. And then for the reference track, I usually make it that lighter blue. So I know this is the exciting part, but let's go through and do it and get organized. So I might go to my mix window here real quick. So I'll just do Command M to go to my mix window. Sometimes in the mix window, it's a little bit easier to move stuff around this way. So I'm going to go move my master fader all the way to the left. I'll move my reference track right next to it. While we're here, I'll go ahead and just make it that lighter blue. I like that. And then let's see, I'll leave my vocal tracks that blue. Let's see, we'll make the keys orange. I'm going to go back to the edit window so I actually do this in order. Let me bring the bass down below the drums here. And do it right before the electric guitars here. I usually like to have all my drums at the top, like even as specifically as the kick is the first track in the session. So while I do that, I'll also have my selector tool out, and I'm just going to hold shift click, and I'm going to just click on every other clip here. Notice they're all different colors, and it automatically goes to clips and tracks. So I'll hit the yellow button, and now they're the same yellow as the drums. By the way, this is all brought to you by the Selector Tool, which when you're using the Selector Tool and changing colors, it will select the actual track and help you change the color. If you're using like the grabber tool, then it gets complicated. So let's see. Let's continue, go down. Let's make our base purple. Yeah, I usually like to do a darker purple. And by the way, this is all opinion based, but I think it helps keep me organized, because when I go back to a session that maybe I haven't looked at it for, months or years even, and they're, doing a remix or something like that, I kind of know what's going on. So I'll keep it this like sort of green color. I'm just going to make that green as well. Same green. It's pretty disgusting green color. The keys, I said, let's have them be orange. So let's do that. Make them sort of that same orange. And then with the vocals, the tracks look fine. So I'll just change the actual clips to, I changed them to the non-default blue. Let's have them be default blue. And then if I go to clips and tracks, notice it automatically changes it to clips and tracks here. I'll make that lighter blue. And then my reference track looks fine. So there we go. So now if I go over to my mix window, I can see I have all my drum tracks, bass, 2 guitar tracks, some keys, and then some vocals. So this is a pretty straightforward track. Let's see. Let's go back here. I'm going to go back to the edit window. Let me just real quick make the edit window small. So now I can just kind of see everything. So I see all my drums are at the top, bass, guitars, keys, and vocals. One of my big issues, pet peeves with this session is that they've named like the mic that they're using, which I really don't like. See how it says like, it's like the drum chamber and then the mic M81. It's like, I don't need to know what mic they used. I mean, I know this was done by Telefunken, so probably part of this is to like showcase what microphones they used. But instead, if you're going to do like the microphone choice, I would rather put those in the comments, or, if you want to wow us with all the cool techniques or the $3,000 mic that you used to do the session, put it in the comments, like M81, distant, distant mic, or, whatever you want to, or disdain mic, whatever you want to put in there as far as comments. And so what you could do is you could then in your edit window view selector, you could include comments in there if you wanted to. Notice how it says M81 here, so I know that that's the mic I used there. And if you go to your mix window as well, notice in the comments here it says you used an M81. So I like that. So you could have information about the track, but right now, see how that doesn't really make much sense? And now it's like drums, kick in, and M82. So I'd really just rather have this be like kick in and, put M82 in the comments if you want. But now see how just from a glance from far away or even up close here, I can just see that's the kick mic. And then, the next one here is the kick out. So I won't go through and do each one, but I really don't like this file naming convention. Like no one really cares about the mic you used. I mean, include it, and you can include it in your session documentation or even in the comments, but don't put it in the track because then I can't read it. By the way, if we wanted to expedite this too, we could just hit after changing this one, we could hit the next, and it'll just take us to the next one. So it looks like, yeah, I mean, once again, this was from Telefunken, so they wanted us to know, what mics they were using. I think this is overhead. I don't know. Is it overhead left or right? It didn't really say. Looks like there's like rack toms here in M81. So I'm not going to get too carried away and do all this, but it just makes a lot more sense if I can see like, okay, this is the kick in, this is kick out. These are the drum overheads. Let me actually just go through and familiarize myself. So I think that's toms. So I'm just going to do toms because it says rack, so I think it means rack toms. That's just a room mic. Let me put that on there. I'm just going to need to know what these things are. So then here's the snare, and we'll say B, which is the snare bottom. So they put a mic on the bottom and the top. And then there's the snare top. Great. So that's all I really need to know. It looks like they have, so yeah, let me just organize this. And then these just look like sort of chamber mics. So we'll just say room, I guess, or ROM. I'll do room left and I guess room right. No, this is a floor. So they did one like above and below. That's pretty cool. Okay, so we'll just call this the floor mic then. In other words, these are going to be like ambience, room mics, that type of thing. So I'm just going to take off the L here and just have them be room mics. Okay, so I'll drag these two over to the left. I'll leave kick in, kick out. Usually I like to have my snares next. I might get rid of some of these extra tracks. We've got like an overhead track. Notice how it's stereo, so they must have done some stereo overhead technique. When we do drums a little bit later in the semester, we'll talk about stereo miking techniques for drums. Yeah, so it looks like we've got our kick, snare, we've got our overhead, which is like the entire drum. We have some tom mics here. We have two different room mics and then a floor mic. So we have our bass DI, which went directly in. And then for these guitars, once again, it's just a guitar. It's telling us all this other information. It's just an electric guitar, I guess. So we'll put the amp and stuff they use in the comments, but looks like they used an amp and the M60, and we'll just call this EL Guitar 2. And that just makes a little bit more sense. Yeah. And then keys, it just told us it was on an amp versus DI. And then we have our vocals on the different M80 versus another M80 and actually 3 different M80 microphones. So it's almost kind of like, well, then why do we care? So can we just call it Vox 1, Vox 2, and Vox 3? I mean, I think that just makes more sense. Okay, so by the way, you're like, Doug, this is annoying. Like we have to take all this time to organize it, but I think this will just help us in the long run as we're mixing. So let's go to the next step here, which is to create markers. So I just made some basic ideas about where markers should be. I thought at bar 6, that's kind of where it starts. The downbeat happens at bar 7, roughly. And then I have some verses, choruses, solo. It's kind of a jammy song. There's not really like hard choruses. It's more of like they jam and they get to like sort of the word Santa Fe, and there's a little bit of a turnaround, then followed by a solo, and then they kind of do the same thing again. So it's almost like A to A prime to like a solo, then A2 to A2 prime, and then it sort of ends. So that's kind of the gist of it. So it's not really like a verse chorus type song. It's a little bit more jammy. I feel like it feels like somewhere in between like a jam band or like a kind of more experimental band and then like Lake Street Drive, I think. So okay, let's see. So let's go ahead and create those markers. I'll just do a few here. So it looks like it wants us to start at bar 6. So I'm just going to navigate to bar 6, which is, we're a little too zoomed in. Let's go to bar 7. Here's bar 6. So by just clicking on that bar, let's see, I'm in slip mode, which is not good. I want to make sure I'm in grid so that I can only select the grid. And we'll go to 6 here, and I'll make my first location, which I think I said is what? The first location, I want that to be called start. It's a pretty hard one to remember. So let's do start, and that'll be my first one. Then I think at bar 7, it was supposed to be the DB or the downbeat. Sometimes that's helpful to just know where it actually starts versus the actual start. I think there's like a count off here at the start. Yeah, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and the actual downbeat is not till 7. Let's see, and then I believe the lead singer begins to sing around bar 11, so I put that as verse 1. So I just went to bar 11. By the way, remember I'm hitting enter on the keyboard, and I'll call this verse 1. That'll give me my verse. So if we roll a little bit before, yeah, so they begin a little bit earlier, but the real like sort of downbeat of the measure is on 11 because there's sort of a pickup rhythm here before the actual start of measure 11. Just like the whole song kind of came in a little bit early before the downbeat as well. All right, moving right along here, let's do the bar 27. So by the way, if I really wanted to just make this fast, I could go up here and type in 27, hit the enter button and call this C1. I could then go to, what else do we got? The solo is at bar 33. So I could go to 33 and that just moves my marker to 33. Hit enter to bar 33 and this is called the solo. Let's see what else we have. You can go through and do this fast, not as fast as I am, but let's see, 43 is verse 2. So I'll just put V2. You can see how I can make this kind of fast. And then bar 60 is C2, just typing in 60 up here. And this is C2. I think that's when they say like Santa Fe. Like I said, there's not like a real proper chorus in this. It's just sort of like there's a turnaround once the name of the song is said. And then it ends at 69. And it's always good to have an end marker. Just so later on when we're bouncing, you can have a very definitive point at where you want it to end. So it just doesn't bounce forever. So this is end. And now if we double click here, you can see now we have our start, our downbeat, our verse 1, chorus 1, solo, verse 2, chorus 2, and end. Well, great. That looks pretty good. So I think the next part of the lab is none of this unfun stuff. I think it's about creating a basic mix based on the reference track. So let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of the reference track here. So if I go to my mix window here while I'm in Pro Tools, I'm just going to switch here. When I soloed the reference track there, it soloed. Let me show this real quick. It muted my mic input here. So I'm going to command click on the S here to solo safe it. So even if I solo this track, you can still hear this track. It doesn't get soft muted. Okay, let's go and hide that though again now. Maybe you were interested in not hearing my voice anymore, but unfortunately that's not how this walkthrough works. So great, let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of this reference track. I can go to the downbeat here and let's take a listen.
Since I can't have you here, I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could. I'm loving you like I should. And I go walking where there's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard.
All right, so there was the reference mix. As you can see, it's clipping already, right? So we have that sort of issue that we have to deal with. But the reference is pretty hot. It seems pretty organic, right? It feels like a band in a room. So that's going to kind of, we're not going to be using like probably crazy effects in this session. We're probably just going to be trying to use effects that sort of recreate the sound of a room. And just enhance sort of the space that they were recorded in. The Telefunken studios are beautiful, and the microphones they're using are fantastic. So I'm sure this was just like kind of a band in one of their live spaces, and it just really has that really kind of organic feel to it. I've gone ahead and actually did some mixing, or at least if we're on the static mix step, I went through the different steps, which if you take a look here, it's asking us to do a few things. So it's asking us to start with adding some trims to create sort of a static mix or static levels. Then it wants us to go ahead and use some EQ to add clarity, so take some of the low end out of some instruments. It also asks us then to apply some compression using the art method, as well as EQing for weight. And then I also added some reverb as well. Once again, like I was saying, I don't think we have to get too carried away with a lot of these effects, because it's really just like mostly like levels and compression and some panning in this session, and maybe some time-based effects like reverb. I don't think there's a whole lot of like automation or other things that we need to do. And we obviously don't need like crazy amounts of effects, because it is supposed to be more of sort of an organic sounding track. So if you look here, when I started with my trims, I went here and on Insert A, I added just the trim plugin here. On my vocal tracks here, I set them all to -3. I actually went and made the vocals 2 and 3, which were kind of like backup vocals. I put those at -6. My keys, I put at -9. I thought my next most important thing besides the vocals were the bass, so I put those at -6. And then I think my guitars were also at -6. And then for my drums, I turned them down quite a bit. And I found that what I ended up having to do is with my compression and EQ to like boost the signal quite a bit. So maybe reducing the drums as much as -12 is not necessary. It kind of feels like everything was sort of recorded already at sort of a static level. So maybe using the trims aren't as necessary, but it's just good practice to kind of, I noticed like just listening to the, if we just like listen to the raw multi-track, the vocals are very quiet. So in general, I kind of had to turn everything else down so that we could hear those vocals. Next, I went through and I used some subtractive EQ or EQ for clarity, and I just used one of the high-pass filters here to cut everything below 250 out. And it looks like both of the guitar tracks. I also did it on the keys track as well as on the vocals tracks. I obviously didn't cut any low end out of the bass, and I also did not cut any low end out of the drums for right now. I may do some to the snare or the overheads, but I just decided to kind of leave them as they are. Once again, this is not supposed to be like a super processed track. It's supposed to sound like a group in a room. So I didn't get too carried away with that. As far as compression, I definitely used the art method here on the kick part. So I definitely have the attack fairly long here so that that punch of the kick can get through. As well as had the release fairly long, so it kind of grooves with the song. I ended up turning the ratio down to about a 2-to-1 or almost 2.5-to-1, and my threshold at about -21. So, with the art method, we start with the attack anywhere, release as fast as possible, ratio like 100-to-1, and the threshold turned all the way down to as sensitive as possible. So I just went through one by one and backed those off. Let's see. As far as other compression, I did some on the snare top. I also did on the overheads. I did the old classic 18 and 18 on the BF76 here. I backed it off a little bit because it was a little bit too loud. So yeah, on the bass track though, I turned that input up all the way to really get sort of a solid bass line, and then sort of pulled the compression back. Let's see. I did similar 18 and 18 on the guitars as well as the keys to kind of level them. And then on the vocals, I did more sort of a classic compression on a vocal where I had the attack and release sort of middle of the road, both around 12 o'clock, with only like a maybe 2-to-1 ratio. That even that's kind of high. And then I kept the threshold at around -30. So yeah, let's listen with and without. If I want to bypass all these plugins, I can just hold Option and Command to bypass them. Here, let's listen without anything. Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah, I just felt like I got really quiet there because I think I bypassed the talkback track. All right, cool. Let's listen to here's just the initial mix. Let's go to verse 1. All right, here's with my trims on now. All right, definitely with the trims now, we can hear the vocals a lot better. They're at a better level. Everything's still very quiet because, like I said, this was recorded very low here. Let's turn my EQs on now here. These are all the cuts for clarity here. Let's turn the compression on. That really sort of brings it out. And let's turn our EQs on. So that's pretty nice. Yeah, you see how the bass is just sitting. So when you pull that input all the way up on that BF76, it will rock. It will just sit there. And for some instruments, that's great, especially for bass, which is sort of the harmonic foundation, the sort of bass note of everything. That can be really helpful and important to have the bass just sort of sit there. As far as EQ, I EQ'd for weight here. You can see, so on the kick, I identified that around 50 hertz was a good place to boost, and then I boosted an octave above it. Notice I used that 3 dB at both the fundamental and the octave above that, and I used a Q of 0.9, which gives it that nice flat sort of plateau EQ. To complement that, I actually then, so on the left here, if this is our kick track, on our right will be actually the EQ that I used on the bass, which if you notice, it's not boosting at 50, but it's boosting at 100, and then an octave above that at 200. So when we solo and listen to the kick and the bass together, they kind of groove. They are clipping a little bit here, but here's without. Yeah, so without, they sound fine, but they're not really connected. Here's with. Yeah, now they feel like they're together. And when we bring the rest of the mix in,
There's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard.
yeah, they just have some weight and they feel like they're together. One other thing that I noticed too is that there needs to be some time-based effects. So on these drum overhead track, by the way, I muted a lot of the other drum tracks like the kick out, the snare bottom, some of the toms, rooms, and floors. I just found I didn't need them. Not initially, I might bring them in later, but I really just focused on the kick in, the snare top, and the overheads. So basically kick, snare, overheads. Later in the semester, when we talk about drums and drum recording, you'll see I'm a big fan of the sort of kick, snare, overhead with then additional mics as needed. So one of the things I did is I definitely did an 18 and an 18 here on the input and output of the BF76, had a fairly fast attack time and kind of release, slower release to just sort of bring that overhead out. And then I sent them via bus 1 and 2 to Deverb to kind of give them a little bit more. Because if you listen to them on the reference track,
Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
yeah, because even the vocals,
I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
so let's send the vocals there too.
Have you here?
Might be a little much.
I'm going the places you'd be taking me if could.
Let's hear that.
Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
Yeah, so if we go back to our reference.
Have you here?
So it's just so much louder.
I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could. Have you here?
Maybe we'll do more.
I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could. Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
And let's send those keys there too. Really send them back.
It's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should. And I go walking where there's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard.
Yeah, notice how I made it pre-fader the send here, so now they're kind of like sitting further back behind, kind of like they do in the reference mix.
Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
Yeah, notice how they sit further back, and mine do now too.
Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could. And it's
So that sounded pretty good. Like I said, you can decide on different things here, but the idea is just kind of, get as close to the reference track as you can using both trims, some basic panning. You did notice I did pan some of the instruments here as well. I panned the backup vocals hard left and right. I put the guitars hard left and right. And then I sort of left the overheads hard left and right and kept the kick and the snare up the center as well as the bass up the center. So I did a little bit of panning. So trim, panning, EQ for clarity, like I did, some compression, some EQing for weight, as well as setting up some sends and returns. You can do some automation if you want as well. It might not be necessary. You might want to do a volume automation at the end. I believe in the original, there's sort of like a master fade out. I think if we listen to the reference track here, let's solo it. Yeah, so it kind of fades out. Let's see what happens on the multi-track.
Neat.
cool.
Yeah, so see how there's all that talking at the end? So we might even just hear on the master fader, just on the volume here, make 2 breakpoints and just have it fade out. Yeah, and we might want to zoom in a little bit and have that be a little bit later. Yeah, I think I started it way too early, and then I think it took too long. So let me actually undo that. I'll make it, where is it? Maybe have it start there. We'll have it go a little longer. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So if you're going to do some automation, that might be the best place to do it in. Also, let's see. One thing that will help now, you're probably like, everything's pretty quiet right now. Is there any way we could sort of bring up the level? And what I would recommend doing is doing some stereo bus compression. I would try Maxim. It's a pretty good brick wall limiter. We're also going to add some dither here. So let's do this on our master fader plugin here. Let's go ahead and add some Maxim. So we're going to go to Dynamics, and then we're going to go to, let's see, Maxim. And if we look at our Maxim plugin, I'm probably getting, you might be hearing a little bit of delay now, but if I press play, Let's go back a little bit further. Let's go back to verse 1.
Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
Yeah, so I'm barely even seeing any level here. So I'm going to make my out ceiling, let's make it 0.3. So it'll be, or we have to put negative 0.3. So it'll never get up to 0. It'll never clip, but we'll put it up to negative 0.3 here. And then what I'm going to do is start to bring my threshold down, and let's see how that affects the sound.
Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
All right, so
It's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should.
So it got really crispy, much louder by bringing that threshold down. I did it somewhere around like negative, it says 8 here. That's probably pretty good. Let's hear it with and without. Here's with.
Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
I think it's distorting. I'm going to bring it back a little bit. Negative 6 sounds pretty
It's
good.
crystal clear
Here's without.
that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should.
And here's with.
And I go walking where
Yeah, so that it's just going to bring the overall level up, which is going to be nice. Let me go ahead and just pull this plugin off for right now. I'm just getting quite a bit of delay up in the headphones here. So yeah, that'll kind of increase our overall levels. So some people might have been like, well, we're using our trim and we're making something that's quiet even quieter, and we use some of our plugins to kind of bring the gain back up. But, you know, the big thing is then we're not clipping, we're not distorting, and also we can use Maxim at the end to kind of take the overall level and sort of boost it. There's better plugins and there's different plugins that you can do to this to boost the final output, but Maxim comes with Pro Tools, so it's a great way to sort of finalize your session. The only other thing I would do then too is on this last plugin here, I would go to Dither and open POW-R Dither, and I would use noise shaping type 3 to 16-bit. So after you've added some Maxim, done some other things, worked on a mix here a little bit, I would then go and bounce the mix. So if you remember for bouncing, it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to select everything. So that end marker is going to come in super handy here. I'm going to hit Shift Return to select from the end all the way back to the start. By the way, you'll notice I have my two link timeline and edit selection, as well as my link track and edit selection on. If I have these both selected blue, then it'll allow me to do some of the things that you've been seeing me do, where if I select something up here in the timeline, it selects it down in the playlist. Or if I select it here in the ruler, it selects it down in the playlist. And even if I click on end here and hit Shift Return, it'll select everything. So with everything selected, I'm going to do Command Option B, or you can always do it the slow way and go to File, Bounce Mix. I'll name the bounce here, year, month, date, lab project name, and my name. I don't want it to be an MP3. I want to bounce it as a wave. I'll make the output source 1 and 2 because that's my physical output. Notice that other audio bridge output is showing up here. You won't have that, but I have it for the QuickTime. And then we want it to be interleaved, not 24-bit like our session is, but 16-bit, and then sample rate 44.1. So that should be good. And as far as where we're going to bounce it, we want to bounce it in the bounce files folder of this session. So let's just quick go to choose, and there it is, year, month, date, lab 1, Doug B. We'll go to the bounce files and make sure it gets bounced into that folder. So we'll bounce offline, meaning we don't have to hear the whole song. It'll do it in non-real time. Bounced it. If we go to my desktop now and we open up my session folder here, we should see here is our Pro Tools session, year, month, date. There's the session file. We should also see the audio files are full of all the audio files that we did. And if we go to our bounce file folder, there it is. There's the year, month, date, lab 1, Doug B. So this entire folder, which is sitting here on the desktop, I'm going to right click on it and go to compress. And when I compress it, it should take a little second here. You see it's going to take it. It's about a 700, almost 800 megabyte file. So it might take a minute here. It's compressing it. And then once I get that going, I guess I could go ahead and navigate over to my Google Drive here. And let's minimize this here for a second. Why don't we go to, let's see, Google Drive. This will probably be like my personal drive, but under here, I can go to, let me switch accounts. I'm going to switch into my D. Bielmeyer at Northeastern. That requires me to, I didn't have to log in, but you can see it's my Northeastern version of Google Drive. You can just hit cancel here. So what I'll do is, I think if I go to my drive, I probably have some folders for recording 2. So I'll open recording 2. You can see there's some other stuff in here. So what I'll do is, now that file has zipped here on my desktop, I'll go ahead and take that and drag it right into that window. And I don't have to zip it because it's already zipped, which will save a lot of time. Now, if you notice here, this is almost 800 megabyte file. So especially if you're on home internet and it's slower, it will take a minute to actually, or a few minutes to upload. Once your file uploads, you can, as always, right click on it and go to share. And if you go to the share plus tab, you'll have a couple options of how you want to share it. So, let me go back to that again, go to share. And yeah, if you notice here, right now I have it set to, right now I can access it and anyone with the link can edit it, right? And it's anyone with the link. Notice there's restricted, only Northeastern, or anyone with the link. You want anyone with the link, and instead of viewer, you want editor, so I can download it. Once those settings are all correct, you can hit copy. So we've copied that link. And then if we go over to the assignment folder here and we start the assignment, so we're back in Lab 1A, we can just paste the website URL. I'm just hitting Command V to paste it, or you can right click and hit paste. And when I do that and submit my assignment, I should get confetti and spaceships that lets me know I submitted it, and it'll tell you on the right-hand side that you submitted it. So that's pretty much the lab. Like I said, the mixing part probably will take the longest, and you can kind of decide like how you want to do that. As always, I'm here to help if you want more information about how to go and actually set up the mix, or give you some suggestions on how to make your mix sound more like the reference track. Hope you enjoyed this walkthrough. Stay tuned for the walkthrough for Lab 2 coming up next week.